and welcome back to Behind the Mask. I'm one of your hosts, EJ, and joining me today is Lori.
Hello.
And T.
Hi, everyone.
Unfortunately, Kathy wasn't able to join us today. We were planning on doing a different episode, but so we just kind of last minute changed some plans to, she'll join us hopefully in the next couple of episodes to finish up her little thing about self-care, which we are looking forward to doing when she's able. And but today we're going to talk about the massive insecurity. We all have them. This is episode 28. I think we all have gone through insecurities in our lives, either when we were young, as we were older. I know I've dealt with a lot as I've grown up, things I've gotten through. I know I've talked about a lot of my insecurities in the past on the podcast. So some of these may be kind of old hat, so to say, if you've been listening to us for a while, but we're going to share a little bit about that. Some of our insecurities, as well as how we've gotten through the ones that we've dealt with. Just a friendly reminder that anything we say cannot be used or should not be used as a diagnosis or treatment without talking to your own doctors, medical professionals, therapists, or psychologists. This may be a little bit of a heavy topic for some. So just be more, kind of a warning that there may be some triggers in here. So just be mindful of that. And yeah, so I think we'll let Lori and Tina take it away and I'll follow along.
I thought it was great last night. You and I got to chat, T, and we were like, wow, insecurities. We all have them, right? And there's so many. And I think insecurities they're always with us. They don't go away, and you were talking about that. And so after we chatted, I did a little research and I was like, okay, so what are some of the big ones? What are common ones, And I was surprised on the list. I was like, oh, I didn't even think about that. And I'm like, oh, I have that one and that one and that one.
Were you suddenly feeling very insecure?
Oh my goodness, yes, I was. I was like, oh.
Yeah, but also in a way validated too. Because Lori read some of them off to me this morning and I was thinking like, yeah, there's some she mentioned that I was like, oh, that's an insecurity. I guess, wow, that makes me feel better that I'm not the only one that feels the same way, because a lot of times you feel you're alone in that situation.
Right.
Or feeling.
Yes. So I think some of the common ones, we're too fat, we're too thin, we're too young, we're too old, our skin is too fair or it's too dark. Our hair color, we're not blonde, or we're a redhead and we've got freckles and, but we can be too tall and too short, and we can have financial, insecurities. We can have social anxieties, of course. Emotionally, we can be not strong enough or simply not enough. Which, yeah. So I was just surprised at how many and how common they are. So
do you see a theme though?
Say that again.
Do you see a theme?
Yes.
Two.
Yes, we're this or that.
Judgments.
Right?
They're judgments. They're qualifiers. They're some sort of opinion, passing an opinion on something.
You're right. I know my counselor has really been working with me on trying to look at myself, view myself, deal with my own stuff without judgment.
Mindfulness.
Just be. Don't worry so much about any right or wrong or, good or bad. And that, I know that I've confessed, already that I'm a perfectionist to the core. As you and I talked last night, there are insecurities and things that will be with us forever. And we'll get into talking about how we deal with some of those that are with us all the time. But, you know, it's very difficult for me to not see things as right, wrong, good, bad. And I know I'm not the only one. We're all that way. It's a societal problem. We measure everything. Everything. Is there anything we don't measure? I can't think of it.
So what's the purpose of measuring it? Why do we do it?
Well, I know in my mind we're always often okay, just starting out with New Year's, right? Let's have a New Year's resolution. Let's have a goal. I know I don't love them either. I really who decided New Year's resolutions was a good thing? Some sadomasochist out there. You know, because we set those goals right away in the beginning of the year, and then we don't follow through on them, and we don't make them. And well, some goody two shoe out there does. I don't know, but I rarely ever felt like I went to the end of the year and went, yes, nailed that one, got it. You know?
Okay. Here's the thing, is that the purpose between New Year's resolutions and judging things is there's several things. There's one, but one of them is we can't grow unless we identify a place to grow in.
Okay.
So doing those things, we're searching for ways to grow. We're searching for ways to better ourselves. We pass judgment on things to know if it's right for us or wrong for us. So having a right or wrong, good or bad, isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's how it's used. Do we use it as a weapon against ourselves to beat ourselves up? Because then at that point, we've lost the purpose. But if we use things to measure, we know whether we're hitting the mark or not. And if we're not hitting the mark, we can go back to the drawing table and try again.
Right.
But because we don't
so
do that, it builds into an insecurity and a way to beat ourselves up. And I know people who say, well, that's how I motivate myself, is I beat myself up.
Mm.
My question is, how's that working out for you? Do you feel better at the end of the day? Probably not. And that's where it becomes an insecurity.
Oh, wow. That's really heavy. I'm really processing a lot of that. I know this last couple of years, as I've been working on self-care and self-examination and mindfulness, I don't think I realized how self-sabotaging and destructive many of my thoughts and actions were. You know, I'm a self-sabotager. And destructive in my thoughts. I've had to move some pretty big mountains and really engage in a level of mindfulness that I've never engaged in before. And I know that some of us grow up in, excuse me, you know, an atmosphere or a home environment that encourages some of that destructive behavior, kind of gets us started not in a healthy way, which definitely I think, you know, I'm one of those. And so it is hard to change that. It's hard to shift that focus and to, like you said, use it as a positive marker or, you know, a healthy goal, so that I can focus or refocus where needed. All those things sound so enlightening and so helpful and healthy. So going to continue to thrive in those goals.
Another thing that is striking me about that list you were listing off is so much of it was outward. Like, how am I seen? How do others see me? Which is a really a legitimate source for insecurities. But it's skewed, number one. because then it's in the eye of the beholder. So why am I insecure if it's not my eyes beholding it? No,
Oh, that was
that's just kind
beautiful.
of an off thought. And then the other piece too is that those insecurities are probably the least, I think some might argue with me, but they're the least of the insecurities we can have. The insecurities that really drive us and who we are and or not, who are not, are the ones that are internal, the ones that are emotional, or that go on in our brain, the things we say to ourselves, or have been said to us about who we are. I think those insecurities are the ones that we've been kind of talking about, like what you were just talking about and stuff. The insecurities that are about who we are as a whole person are probably the ones that impact us either the most, likely the most negatively, because it gets to something that I refer to as negative. It's not just me that refers to it, but it's a negative core belief. And when we have a negative core belief, anything that is disproves that negative core belief, we reject. Like if my negative core belief is I'm stupid and I go to take a test and I get a 95%, most people who don't have that negative core belief would be like, oh, look, I got a 95%. That's great. But someone who has a negative core belief of I'm stupid, they reject the 95% and focus on the 5% and say, that's the proof that I'm stupid, because a smart person would have gotten that one question that I got wrong. They would have gotten that one question right. So, yeah, I think those negative core beliefs are based on, or they feed those insecurities that are internal or based on internal things.
You are definitely hitting the proverbial nail on the head for sure.
Well, and I think it's also too, like your external, like there's, some teachers, are very, structured and strict on, policies and different things. So then when there's no teaching involved, it's more of a forcing. And then that becomes a struggle too, because then we start taking all that and they're like, some teachers think 80% is a B, while others think it's a C, and the way they do their grading scale. And so everybody's different. So it's like, sometimes it's so much of a hard thing that you want to do like 100% best, because you don't want to get that B minus or that, C plus, because a C is a bad grade, and just all those things. And then that starts building and snowballing, and it becomes a core belief, because then you start thinking that a B isn't good enough, that B plus has got to be better, and I got to have an A minus, or I don't want an A minus, I have to have an A or above, and
so a piece of insecurities is how we define things.
Yeah.
So I might be insecure about, well, one of the things that's pretty well known is I have social anxiety. So I might be insecure in how I behave in a situation or how people perceive me in a situation, but it's because of part of it's how I define it. What is a successful interaction? How do I know whether the other person sees me as good enough, right? Or whatever it is that I'm assigning that particular interaction it depends on how I define it. And it's that I think, and then academically, when we're trying to succeed academically, how do we define academic success? What is successful? I remember when I was, through college, I was always at the top. I was always on the dean's list. I was always pretty regularly 4.0 student, right? Every once in a while, I'd get a quarter where I had to take statistics and or math.
Yeah.
And my GPA might not be so high, but it was still really high. I still had a very good GPA. And then I went into my master's program and I saw that my GPA came down. Now, did it come down to a bad grade? At the time, I thought it was, but looking back, I still had very good grades, but I wasn't the top of the class. And, all these things. And I started feeling very insecure. And then someone looked at me and said, so when you get a job and you start working and you're working with your clients, do you think they're going to look at you and say, what was your GPA? Now, a little side note, the same goes for doctors. And I think sometimes maybe we should ask them what their GPA was, but
Yeah.
If it's a brain surgeon, just
yeah,
saying, I really kind of
please
want to
tell
be at the
me,
top of the class.
please, yeah, please tell me you're at least up there a little bit,
You
but
you don't want the class clown necessarily to be your,
yeah. So I did have to learn to separate my GPA from being a descriptor of who I am.
Oh, I like that. I think every student at every point in their life, if we could learn to do that.
Mhm.
And what's amazing is when we're having fun in a class and we're enjoying it and we're just doing it because of we love the subject and we're just enjoying taking in information, we actually do so much better. And
Mhm.
we, even if the grade doesn't necessarily reflect it, what we retain and what we learn and grow in that healthy environment is so much better when
Mhm.
it's not focused on A, B, C, D, GPA. Um,
well,
some
and
of my favorite classes are those
which,
that I didn't have to worry about that.
right, which kind of makes me, think, and, insecurities start at a young age. We as adults have them, but these insecurities can start young. You know, Parents, saying certain things to their children about kids come home with B's. Then the parents like, well, why didn't you get an A in that? Or why didn't you do well? Then that starts instilling that a B isn't good enough. So then you get insecure if you see a B plus on there because you're afraid that you're going to get judged, or so it's all, and so we get instilled in that in a young age, whichever it is, whether it's not good enough in school, you're not playing the right sport, you're not doing as good in the right sport, all this stuff. Or like, there's some kids that don't want to do sports, they want to do something else, and their parents force them into sports. So then when they're not good at something they already know they're not good at, and the parents keep forcing it on them, that is a challenge. So just keep in mind that it continues. And we get through them. We get through some of our insecurities as we grow, as our parents grow. And then maybe some of our parents' insecurities start to mirror onto the kids, which is like being a force the other way around. And it's projecting. So like the parents' insecurities about something can project onto the kids, and then the kids start taking that as an insecurity when they really don't need to. And that is really frustrating because
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, because I feel like sometimes then the kids become insecure about things that maybe they don't need to become insecure, which can then start a chain reaction of other insecurities that will affect the kids. And then, they're getting a counselor at 10 years old because, or I don't know, like sometimes I kind of wish I would have started seeing a counselor sooner than like 25. I'm glad I did when I did, because I needed it at the time. But some of the insecurities I had when I was younger could have maybe been prevented because I wasn't, seeing a counselor. On the other hand, I know there were things my parents projected on me. I can't tell you how many times my mom didn't want me talking to anybody on the internet in the 90s because you don't know who you're talking to. Don't give, and it's all this, don't give your address. I'm like, well, obviously I'm not going to give somebody my address. But then I've made like 3 best friends from the internet. And so like, it's just it's hard because my mom was projecting a fear of security on that. But then I met my friend, a couple of my friends, like best friends, came from online. Like, it's more than 3. But yeah, I mean, so it's like I have all these best friends and a lot of them came from the internet. So I'm like, thanks, Mom. I know you had that insecurity about that, but I worked through it. Will that happen every time? No. But it could happen.
I was going to say that one of the redeeming things about being a grandparent is that we get, well, we've grown a lot, hopefully. We've mellowed, and we've dealt with some of our insecurities, hopefully. And you kind of get a second chance with the grandchildren, to love unconditionally, to be on the sidelines and cheer them on with no expectation of a projected, we want this, we want that, at least that's what I found. It is one of the greatest joys of being a grandmother, is that I feel like I get to just be loving, and I get to be the biggest cheerleader out there, and I just get to meet them where they're at. And I think a lot of that has come with my own counseling, my own growth, my own learning, and then, just getting to see things differently. So I love that redemptive part of being a grandparent. So that's one of the things that I get to see right now, a lot of, especially since I just had another granddaughter. Well, my children had, yes, a child, and I'm getting ready to have another one.
Yeah.
In a few weeks. So I am just currently buried in grandmother heaven.
Right. Yeah. So I was thinking, I had to think it out. I'm like, I kept saying, so it's five friends I've made online. And I've made quite a few other ones, but like people I consistently talk to now. And I just think I saw, like you were talking about grandparents, my grandmother lived with my mom and dad and I for a while, my mom's mom. She was even more insecure about, I'm like, so her insecurities projected onto my mom, which then projected onto me. But then I kind of broke the cycle because I met somebody in 98. And then I've met others in the last like 10, 20 years, just through conversations and mutual interests. And I'm like, had I listened to those insecurities of my grandmother and my mother, I wouldn't be where I am in that regard with those friends. And there's others that I'm like really close with too. I think grandparents, like, especially if you have a multi-generational family where you have like great grandparents, parents, you can kind of start to see as you get older, like whose insecurities and where they came from. So on the topic of insecurities, we talked a little bit about what they are. What are some that we have? Because we're not going to get out of this without sharing at least one. So who wants to start that?
For bringing us back around to that. Who wants to go first? I would say, if I'm being vulnerable, one of the bigger ones that I still deal with is the financial one. I'm definitely not Daddy Warbucks over here. I haven't won the lottery, and I don't make $1 million, and yet I really have grown over the years in that insecurity, realizing that some of the insecurities, some of the things that I was focusing on weren't necessarily, it really was about keeping up with the Joneses, or what my neighbors would think, or what the other women in the PTA meeting were going to think, or, other sisters and women at church. And, if I ask for help, does this make me look weak? Do I look like I don't know how to handle money because I got myself in a pickle in this place, or because my children don't have, the latest, coolest shoes and clothes. What kind of a mother am I? I mean, I've struggled with all of that for many, many, many years. And yeah, I would say financial is probably, but it's also one that I'm going to say within the last 5 years, I have learned to come to peace with it and to let it affect me far less than it's ever affected me before, in being in a mindful place and worrying, as T would say, a little less about what others think and just caring about what I'm focused on, or what I feel like God wants me to be focused on. Am I a good steward according to Him? Do I have a rich, full life intrinsically, not necessarily monetarily? And so my focuses and my goals have changed. And that, how I feel like I realize I do live a rich, full life. And I'm a millionaire in here because of the blessings that my life has, but they have nothing to do. I wouldn't, be out there competing with Oprah for any means, But yeah, so that's mine. All right, somebody else step up.
I think what's interesting for me is that current insecurities happen to be old insecurities that pop up. Things that I don't normally think about every day or don't haunt me every day. So it's almost like they take a vacation. But then I'll try something new. And then I find, oh, there's that old insecurity. So for example, I got a few things that I'm trying that are new. And I think it comes down to, if I were to boil it down, would be the negative core belief of I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not this enough. I'm not that enough. And so that would be, I think, the one I could put my finger on the most right now, is recognizing that, and recognizing it's connected to starting something, things that are new.
Right. Yeah.
I love you so much. And I'll just tell you, until the day you die, you're more than enough.
Oh, thank you.
I think, sorry, I just got a phone call. I think for me, you brought up finances, and that was definitely, has been something tight for a long time. I've never really been per se insecure about it, but it's been hard. It does get hard to ask for help, when you do get down to like the last few days before payday and you don't have enough gas money or something like that. Mine, for me, it is definitely a physical outward, like, look, I mean, obviously you guys know me, you've seen me, I'm sure you've seen pictures. If you've seen any of my social media, I'm not, like built perfectly. I'm heavy set. I'm like overweight. I have, some health problems that cause that to happen. And I don't know. I was judged a lot as a kid, going through junior high school, teased a lot. I dealt with it. But even as an adult, you get into a new social situation and you're worried about what people think of you. I'm sure there's people that think I'm unhealthy because I, am overweight. And, I've spent the last up until recently, the last 7 years within the same church body. And I've not say proven myself, but I've been able to share the content of my character with those people. And they've loved me for who I am, not what I look like. And they've accepted who I am as what I look like. Whereas, I've come into this new social situation of a new church body, and I know there's been a lot of hesitation about getting involved. And I feel like right now even though it may not be true, my insecurities want to say that they're judging you for what you look like. And, even if they're not, just because that's, something on my mind. And it's not something I can get rid of. And I'm proud of who I am. Like, I don't need to be 150, 75 pounds and, looking like a supermodel. I don't want to be. Do I want to be healthy? Yes. And am I eating healthy? Yes. So I'm doing the right things, but not everybody sees that. So then that's like the judgments and stuff. So that starts to build the insecurities of, well, what are they really thinking about me? And, because I haven't had a chance to get in and start helping serve, in this church body because I'm so new, and I just haven't seen, who I am outside of what I look like physically.
So you're making an interesting point. Insecurities can be how we view ourselves or how how others view us. So, like from what I know of you as a person, you're pretty secure in who you are, and you've got confidence in that. But you are insecure in whether others will take the time and their own biases, we'll just call it for what it is, and put them aside to get to know who you are. And once they're there, you're secure. You're like, once people know who I am, I feel pretty good. I feel pretty good about my interactions with other people. That's sort of what I'm hearing. And like I said, in my interactions with you, I know that you, as a person, you're secure in who you are. But as long as people are putting labels on you, that,
Right.
yeah, there's not so much security in how others will view you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's kind of about them.
Yeah.
Turns out.
Yes, totally. Because it's about their insecurities.
Right.
And their fears and their concerns and their judgments.
Judgment.
And I've always said that. I don't, I am confident in who I am. And, when you point the finger at somebody, how many fingers are pointing back at you? So if somebody's pointing a finger and saying she's fat, how many fingers are pointing back at them? What insecurities, what things are you projecting on me that you don't need to? Like,
right.
So yeah. And it's an environmental thing, and I'm sure I've heard the stories about people's traveling to, foreign countries and the judgment. Different countries see people who are overweight differently. Some are very treated poorly, judged. So it's a slippery slope. And it's something I've dealt with all my life. And again, I'm confident in, but it's the other people's insecurities, and
it's a reality that their insecurities, their projection, their judgment does impact you. So there's no denial of that. So even though it's based on what they're saying and doing, doesn't mean that it hurts or affects you any less. Like, it can limit your access to having resources, and limits your access to having social support from others, and not feeling isolated, and just all these things. So I'm certainly not devaluing the impact of that insecurity that comes up of, what are these people going to think about me? Because those are important.
Right. Yeah.
They are. So T, let's dive into that just a little bit more, because so let's say, because I know all three of us are continually working on our mindfulness and our emotional health. And, we're doing that right here in the podcast. But so how do we take these other people's insecurities and, I don't know, I'm trying to maybe lessen that effect, or, I used to say when I was in the helping lead a single moms ministry, I would tell the single moms, I want you all to be like ducks, because ducks, the water rolls off their back. And because society is going to judge you, it's going to think that you should be doing more or less or anything other than what you're currently doing. And you're going to be twisting about this way and that every day, 24/7, if you allow all of this to penetrate that, the skin, if you will. So we can't necessarily change others. Well, we know we can't. We can only change ourselves. So what do we do? How do we do that? What psychologically, mentally, emotionally, how do we counter all of this stuff that's going to come in and be a little more like the duck and let it roll off our back?
So a lot of it comes down to knowing what you have control of, and you were alluding to that. I don't have any control of what other people think or say or do. I can impact it, I can influence it, but I can't control it. And I need to know that they have their own experiences that they have learned to filter the world through in their own, and behave in and all that stuff. I am in control of how I define myself. So, and I need to know what's important to me. And those insecurities suddenly become tools to use to better myself or to make changes. They become guidelines. So, like if I'm insecure about starting something new, well, then that just allows me to understand that I may need to redefine something. I may need to decide if this thing that I'm starting that's new is important enough to deal with that discomfort that comes with it. It may help direct me in which direction to go, or what kind of help to ask for, because I won't know what kind of help to ask for unless I stop and look at what I need. And sometimes insecurities can be a flag, like, oh, I have a need. There's something I need here. And again, just evaluating how important that need is to me. Sometimes the need's not important enough, and so I may walk away from it, but I have to be okay with that, because I then understand, okay, this isn't for me at this time. So just having that internal reflection of how I want to be defined by myself. What, I have to live with myself. Sometimes it's hard. Um, anyway, but I have to be able to live with what my choices at the end of the day, and who I am and whatnot. And for me, it's also about the relationship with God and whatnot. And that definitely plays a part. That's probably a topic too, is our insecurities in our faith sometimes. Anyway, that just popped up out of nowhere. So yeah, just maybe using the insecurities as a guideline.
Right. Yeah.
I like that.
So now that we've talked about our current insecurities, are there insecurities that we've had and dealt with that we've gotten through, we no longer struggle with that, or we're no longer insecure in that, or have a more of a handle on than maybe we did 5-10 years ago?
For me, it's my body. It's my outward appearance. I've had a lot of insecurities over the years about that, especially when I was younger. Youth really is wasted on the young. I didn't understand some things, and that's what changed, is my understanding. So realizing that there's a lot of things that impact how people see me physically. Honestly, some of it is that I got a chance to fix my teeth. That was a huge deal for me. But as far as like my weight and my body itself, I just learned that how I carry myself, how I behave, is part of how people see me. So if I'm assuming that all that people see is my weight or my shape, then I'm limited to that. But if I am comfortable in my own skin and I get out there and I live my life and I feel good, and if I'm not feeling good, I deal with that, people see me in that light rather than that initial. And of course, I do things to try to take care of myself. And that's part of that self-care too, you know, uh, you know, trying to think of something off the top. Oh, I cut sugar out because it made me feel bad. I didn't like how I've learned, I didn't realize it, how much sugar was impacting how I felt and how I carried myself because everything hurt, right? Now without the sugar, I don't hurt the same. So I can get up and move. And then I also realized that it was kind of an epiphany. When I carried myself in a way that indicated I cared about myself, I'd look people in the eye, my shoulders were up, I was more confident. I got that reaction from other people. Like people would respond to me differently. I stopped dressing intense. We'll just sum it up to that. I started putting color on and not and paying attention to what was flattering, not hiding. So just, I guess for me, it was changing how I looked at things, including myself.
Mm, that's beautiful. Um, I think the biggest, most obvious one for me was my insecurities about being alone. Um, it had those insecurities about being alone had risen to a level of dysfunction for me at one point. And it's so interesting because I really worked on it, um, I I began to feel comfortable in my own skin, comfortable sitting in my house alone, comfortable going to a movie theater or dinner and enjoying something even if nobody was going with me. Um, and I learned how to be okay, and not even just okay, but content with being alone. And so much so that, when EJ and I were talking about this new change that we've just done and moving in together, I'm like, wait a minute, I don't need anybody anymore. I don't,
Right.
I'm okay. I'm
Not in the
okay.
same respect. Yeah, yeah.
Right, right. And so for me, it was wonderful to realize that I had gotten to a point where I wasn't as dependent. It I still love people and I still love socializing and all of the things that go with being the extroverted person that I am. But I learned contentment and peace in being
It's
on my own.
it's funny because for me it was the opposite. Like I was so uncomfortable and insecure around people that I preferred to be alone and I loved it. I always I was married and I had kids, but my best time was me by myself. And but I've learned the opposite. Like I can be around people and enjoy that and take that in. I can have both.
Right? We get to have both. It's so lovely. I very much enjoy that. So, yeah.
Yeah, and
So
I
that's
think
probably the biggest one for me. Yes.
right. And I feel like because we did a podcast, gosh, when did we record that? Probably September. I think we recorded it in September, but we didn't release it until like December, all about loneliness. And you were talking then about like you had just become, basically an empty nester officially for the first time. And the first time you were living on your own. And I feel like those like 6 months or so, you had to, like, God was letting you learn about time to, be alone. And then when this opportunity came up, we were both kind of struggling because we'd both been on our own for a while and we liked it and we liked the freedom of it. And, but we also realized that because we've worked through that now, you aren't, like I can be in my room and you can be all doing your own thing and that's okay. We don't have to be socializing with each other the entire time we're in the wake of day. So you've definitely grown a lot in that. For me, I was thinking the biggest one for me is I was told Well, I mean, I alluded to it earlier. Didn't do great in English. I hated English in school. Like, hated English. I think most of my book reports, and if any of my teachers read it, I don't hope you don't change my grades after this, but I think I probably only read the first few chapters of each book I had to do a book report on, and then I just did the book report on the first few chapters, and I negative reinforcement because I get like an A or a B on the paper, and so it wouldn't help. But as I got older and I started diving into like working on like, for say, fan fiction and just trying to like be a writer, because I've wanted to be a writer since I was a kid. But then it's like through school and being like not having the greatest grades, and I'm starting to have that internal fear of like, well, am I good enough? I'm not good enough to be a writer. My English grades are sucky. And I was told by a couple of people, probably it was about 2009, I was told that my writing wasn't good enough. I would never be an author. And it hit me. Then I picked up this book called Anybody Can Write, A Playful Approach by Roberta Jean Bryant. And I read it. And one of the chapters is called Letting Go of Old Notions. And I think this helped me the most. I don't even think I finished reading the book because like I just took it to heart. Like, and she has a few great quotes in there, but she had an exercise the first exercise was to take a piece of paper and write down all of the negative things we've been told about our writing, whether it's you're not good enough, your writing isn't good, your grammar isn't good, just all that. And then you write. What I did, I kind of skipped a step, but what I did was I just took that list, tore it up in pieces, and I burned it because I was letting go of that old notion, all the negatives of writing. Her tip is draw like a stick figure, and on those, like, the stick figure representing you, and then write all those little negatives on you or on that stick figure, and then burn it or tear it up or destroy it or get rid of it. Or I think she even suggested like folding it into a paper airplane and like flying it off a cliff so you'll never see it again, kind of thing. Just getting rid of, and so however you can do that. I did that. A month later or less, I posted my first fan fiction, got rave positive reviews for it. And, because I always felt like I wasn't good enough. And I finally worked through it and realized I'm good enough that now, 15 years later or so, I'm the CEO of a publishing company, editor-in-chief. I've helped self-publish numerous books. I've got 3 of my own books in the works. I'm good enough. I can do it. And if I can, anybody else can. And so I'm really grateful for this book because I feel like it was like the start of my dream. Or continuing my dream, because I dreamed of doing it for years and even into my childhood. I was just telling Lori, like, I'd find a stack of paper and like I'd staple it, together, and then I'd like go and start drawing the cover of my next book, and I was like 5 to 10. So that's always been a passion of mine. And having those insecurities really bring me down really scared me that I wasn't going to be able to do that. And then as I got older and I learned and I read this book and I was able to let go of all that, I got through that, and look where it brought me. So if I can get through it, I know everybody else can.
So you decided to use that insecurity to inform you of you didn't want that.
Yeah.
What you wanted was way more than your doubt.
Yeah.
I know we often like to give a scripture that kind of sums up what we've been talking about. And I was really drawn with all of these insecurities and things to Philippians 4:6-9. So I'd like to read it right now, and maybe EJ, you can put the link in there just to remind people. And again, it doesn't matter of what faith you're from, these words will resonate with what we've been talking about. It says, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. So I kind of
So what's
feel
pretty amazing about that, this is something that's been kind of a growing passion for me, is finding those mental health nuggets in the Bible. So what's really great is we, the scientists, including psychology, I consider it a science. I get that it's probably not considered a hard science, but they try really hard. Anyway, the research supports that. And they're not going out to support something in the Bible. It's just that God talked about it first. But what that describes is positive psychology and gratitude. We know that positive psychology and gratitude especially is a major, major part of healing and quality of life and satisfaction. Just saying.
Amen, amen, amen. I know, EJ, in your outro, you're going to remind people, don't worry if you still have issues, you still have insecurities. Guess what? So do we. So does everybody. We don't get rid of them. But I always want to encourage people, and I know we do this here, but I mean, get professional help, get counselors, seek out fellow believers, seek out education, seek out all of those things that can help you to overcome that. Do not, first of all, I guess what I'm saying is don't be alone in it, and don't let it get you so weighed down that you can't function. You can't even move forward to the next step. And if you find yourself there, please reach out. Please talk to someone. Please share those fears, those anxieties professionally, in your church with safe people, good friends, mentors. Don't do it alone. You're not alone.
Because what happens is if you try to do it alone, it's an echo chamber, and the only feedback you're getting is your own words of insecurity.
Yeah. Amen. Well said. All right, EJ, want to take us out?
Yep. Okay, that's not working. Okay. Just a friendly reminder that anything discussed in this podcast is not to be used as a diagnosis or replacement for conversations with your own doctors, therapists, psychologists, or other medical professionals. You can find this episode on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and more. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as Behind the Mask PC. And if you don't use social media, you can email us at behindthemaskpc@gmail.com to let us know if there's an episode you'd like us to talk about or discuss, or if there's just feedback. We'd love to hear it. Also, if you are a YouTube watcher or listener, feel free to go on and subscribe and like the videos, because we'd really appreciate the listening hours and the subscribers. We've got some goals we're setting for ourselves. We'd love for you to join us on YouTube. You can find me, EJ, as EJ8302 on Instagram and Twitter, and you can also find my YouTube channel, EJ's Downtime, as well as that on social media as EJS Downtime on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find T's other podcasts, Our Journey with Jesus, on Facebook, and there's a Linktree link in our description. You can find Lori as Carpe Sparrow Lori L on Twitter, and Carpe Sparrow Lori Lee on Instagram and Facebook. And on behalf of the ladies and myself, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
Bye, guys.